Hello, hello. This is Julia from the Paper and Ink Boutique. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is my Monday Night Live. I do this every Monday night. Hi, Julie. Hi, Linda. Yes, happy spring. If you're not from Calgary, you probably are unaware, but we had a really big dumping of snow overnight. Thankfully, it's all gone, but it was quite a shock to wake up to that this morning. Hi, Dana. Welcome, everyone. Hello. So, yes, back to doing Monday Night Live. This is the second in my Techniques on Tag series. So, we are going to be doing this. I'll just hold it up to that camera there. I created this tag yesterday and I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect for Monday Night Live. So I'm very excited about this. So I am going to recreate this on my live. Let me switch over to my overhead cam. There we are. I'm just going to lower this just a little bit. Bring it a little bit closer to me. There we go. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to be creating this deck, recreating it basically. And things are not going to be exactly the same because when we try and recreate something exactly the way it does, it never turns out like that. We all know that. So if you wanted to play along with me, I will just, oops, stuck on the sticky mat. Move that up a little bit. There we go. That is great. If you did want to play along with me, I'll just give you a few things that you might want to have on hand. So you can work really on anything. I will be working on a tag that is 6 by 3¼ this is using the Vicki Boutin Foundations paper. So I'm going to be using that. You're going to want to have a couple of inks. I'm using Distress Inks in Twisted Citron and Villainous Potion. You're going to want to have either another ink in a very light color or an acrylic paint, again, in a light shade that will go with your other two ink colors. You're going to want a variety of stamps. You're going to want stamps that are great for just making some various marks, things like these that I'm showing right here, and these are from Paper Artsy. So stamps like that. A focal stamp. So you can see here I've used a circle. There you go. And that is also another Paper Artsy stamp from France Papillon. I'm using this one here. No, sorry, I'm using this one, the big one. And then another image. So I'm using people, and I'll explain what these stamps are. These ones are actually new ones we brought in from Paper Artsy, and they're part of their urban snapshots. Urban snapshots. So this one is called Advice to Sons, and it's USPT3, Passing Time, Advice to Sons. So you can see it's got two masculine images there, plus it's got the two sentiments. This one says, if people did not sometimes do silly things, nothing intelligent would ever get done. And this one, which is Advice to Daughters, and this is again part of the Urban Snapshots release. And this one is Passing Time, USPT4. Advice to Daughters, and you will do foolish things, but do them with enthusiasm. So those are the ones I used here. I did stamp them all out because when I was doing this yesterday, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to use. But today I also grabbed this one out. This is one of, it's not a new release. Paper Artsy's had them. It's just new to our store. So I did stamp this one a couple of times. I might end up using this one. Haven't decided. But I do have that one stamped. Okay. Here we go. So again, here is what I'm going to recreate. There you go. Perfect. So let's get started. So I am going to start just with the plain white tag. Plain white tag. Oh, sorry, I didn't finish. You're also going to need an embossing powder. I chose Superfine Black and embossing ink. as well, and a blender brush and some scissors, as well as a liquid glue. So if you wanted to gather those, having a couple of brushes will also be very helpful. So if you did want to grab those, go ahead, grab them, and then we will get started. Hello, everyone. Hi, how are you? Okay, perfect. So here we are with my tag. How am I going to start? I'm going to start by doing my stamping. So I'm going to just use a variety of stamps from different stamp sets. So you may have stamps like this. So just grab them out, just anything really. They're not going to be, they're just kind of a background stamp, just to kind of help ground our images. Let me just move these out of the way until a little bit later. Okay. I'm just going to use my hand, but if you wanted to use a stamping block, use a stamping block. If you want to use a stamping platform, that's fine too. If you don't have those, you can use the lid of your ink. That's sometimes what I do if I'm too lazy to go find my stamping block. So I'm just going to apply ink, and I am using the amalgam ink. So you want to use an archival permanent ink. Hi, Arlene. Because we're going to be doing a wash over top of this. So if you are using a water-based ink, such as Distress ink, it will just wash away when water is added to it. So we're going to use an ink that's permanent. So if I bring back this in, we're just going to do two opposite corners. I'm not going to be stamping all over the place. I'm just going to be doing two opposite corners. So I am going to stamp here. And I'm going to stamp there. I'm going to put that one back. Let's see, what else do I want to use? I got so many of these stamps and they're absolutely lovely. I love them all. I'm going to use this one. This is like scribbly writing. This one I'm just going to use my hands. There we are. So we're just trying to create a base. And you can see I just stamped once on my ink pad, and then I'm going in and stamping multiple times on my tag. So you can see I'm getting some darker, some lighter, some very light. So you can see I'm not using a lot of ink. Okay, let's put that one away. What else should I do now? Let's pick, let's go with this one. Perfect. So this one's got some straight lines on it. Just going to put that in my ink pad. Perfect. Lovely. Love what's happening here. Gorgeous. I'm going to call that done. So that was easy. Look at that. Created a nice kind of stamped image. Just wipe that ink up. So those are my background stamps. So I'm done with those. So I'm going to take those and I'm going to set them aside because I am done with those. Now this is a permanent ink, but I am going to heat set it before we go on to the next step. So I am going to heat set it really quick. Great. Okay, so that is what I have with my stamping. So you can see that, some darker ink, some lighter ink. I did opposite corners a little bit down the sides, as you can see there. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an acrylic paint. Now, like I said, if you didn't have the acrylic paint, you could just use another ink color. Just use something light. Now this one's almost empty, so I'm going to tap it so I can get some down there. And I don't need very much. That is all I need, and that's probably too much. So little pea size of that. I'm going to take a clean brush, dip it into clean water, and I'm going to start making a wash. Actually, let me grab this. So I'm just going to spray some water in there, quite generous because I just want a light wash. Mix that in there. Okay, so next I'm going to take that light wash and I'm going to cover my entire tag with that. So what this is going to do is it's going to add a nice light color to that background. it's also going to mute that stamping a little bit. It's just going to make it really soft, kind of push it to the background a little bit. Just make it look not quite so harsh, but we're also adding just a small tinge of color. So you can see that's just a really light wash. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to that tag and just keep washing that paint out. Okay. See, so quick and easy. Okay, great. So you can see that very light wash of that very blue-gray color. Just going to clean that up. How do you decide to stamp first instead of point first or paint first? Um, well, the reason why I stamped first, because I knew I was doing the paint wash over it, and I did want it to mute the stamping a little bit. I wanted it to just be very light in the background. So that's why I stamped first. You don't have to stamp first. If you want your stamping to be a little bit more prominent, you could also do it second. Okay, so let me just dry this. Go. So I'm just going to run my fingers down, just straighten that tag out. Okay, so that's what I have here. So you can see just that light wash of paint over my stamping has really muted it. You don't see that dark black anymore, stark black. So it is really giving it a muted look. Now, I did see, I told you I made too much paint. So what I'm going to do, because you know me, I can't waste paint. So I'm just going to grab one of my art journals here. Just going to grab it, move that out of the way. And I'm just going to take that paint and I'm just going to do a light wash in my art journal because this will make a great jumping off point when I'm ready. So I'm just going to take that paint, just do a nice light wash just to use it up because I can't waste it. And this is in my square craft journal from Dina Wakley, which is one of my favorites. And because this is such a light wash, when this dries, it's just going to be so muted, but it's going to make an awesome art journal page later on. Okay, so a nice light wash there. Perfect. Okay, wipe that up, make sure my palette is nice and clean. I'm done with this brush now, so I'm just going to throw it in my water. Set that aside. That will dry for me to use on another day. Okay, so back to our tag. So this is all dry now. Paint's dry, ink's dry. So you can see why it's really important to use a permanent ink for that stamping. Because if I would have used like a distress ink or a distress oxide, anything that's not archival or permanent, as soon as I would have taken my brush with that paint and the water on it, it really would have just washed that stamping away. So that's why it's really important to use an archival or a Gina K amalgam ink just to make that permanent so it doesn't wash away. Okay, great. So now I'm going to take my distress ink pad. Distress ink, you could use distress oxide, whatever. I just happen to have distress ink at home, so I'm going to use this one. Okay, so let me grab my brush. I'm going to pick up some ink. So if I bring this one back in, so you can see where I did my inking. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to start in the corners and I'm just going to start applying ink. Kind of in the same area I did my stamping. And I can go over this as many times as I want to make it as dark or as light as I want. I do want it darker in the corner and then have it kind of fade out to a lighter. That's just personal preference. That's just me. I like it dark in the corner, and then as it kind of gets where the stamping is fading out, I want my ink to fade out as well. But again, that's just me, personal preference. If you like it a little bit darker, you can certainly do that. Okay, so I'm going to flip that around now. I'm going to do this the exact same thing in this corner. I'm just going to start at the corner of that tag. And if you do have any questions, I can see your comments. So go ahead and ask questions and I can answer those for you. Okay, picking up a little bit more ink. So you can see I'm frequently going back to my ink pad and picking up more ink. Coming up the sides, going a little bit towards the center. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to put that ink away. I'm done with that. So that ink can go off to the side. The brush can go off to the side. I'm just going to move this one out of the way for a second. So I don't know if you can see those little spots there? See there over top of my distress ink? So now that I've dried that paint, the paint's not going to move, but I do want to have some splotches on that ink. So how I did that is I took my water bottle, I just held it maybe about 6 inches away from my tag. I'm just going to give it a quick spray. Just we'll need some splotches on there. Might be a little bit hard to see on camera right now, but you can see how I just kind of splattered. I don't know if you can see that. Splattered that. Oh, there we are. Splattered that water on there. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to take a piece of just clean paper towel. I'm going to lay it on that tag and I'm just going to lift that water off. Just going to lift it off. So now you can see what it's created over top of my ink. So I have lifted that ink off and now you can see the paint in amongst that ink. See that? Love, 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 love that. So now that I've added water to this, I do want to take my heat tool. I want to make sure it's really dry. There you go. So can you see all those splotches in the green where you can see the paint showing from underneath? That is where I sprayed it with water and I lifted the ink off. So it kind of just gives it like a cool splotchy look. And that happened in both. That shows it really well there. It happened on both corners. See that? Lovely. Love, love, love that. Okay, so I'm done with this for right now. So I'm actually going to set that tag aside. It's going to sit up here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start creating this part here. So how did I do that? Well, I'm going to grab my stamp platform. Let me just dry this. It still has some ink on it. Okay, I'm going to grab my stamping platform. I'm going to grab my stamp that I want to use, and I'm going to, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to just trim down just a smaller piece of paper here. There we go. Okay, so again, still working on Vicki Bouton's Foundations paper. Okay, so I'm going to put my stamp on there. Doesn't matter where it is because I am going to cut it out. Okay, pick that up. Now I am going to emboss this. So I'm going to use an embossing powder, which means I need to use a sticky ink. So I'm going to use the Wow embossing pad. So this is a clear ink and it stays sticky so that I can put the embossing powder on it. Before I get started, better use my anti-static tool. I always forget this, so I'm just going to rub that across my paper so that the embossing powder only sticks where the ink is. Okay, so going to ink up my stamp really good. I'm going to stamp it once. I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to ink my stamp up again. And I'm going to stamp it a second time. Perfect. That is done. I'm going to leave that stamp in there because I am going to use it again in a little bit. So let's set that aside. Let me grab my here we are, just using a coffee filter and superfine detail black embossing powder. And I'm just going to dump it over that entire image. Okay. Give that a tap. We want to make sure wherever there's ink that the embossing powder is going to stick there. Going to tap that off. There we are. Just going to take a brush here, just brush away some of the excess that's on there. I'm not too worried about the outer part because this is going to be cut out, but I just want to make sure I don't have any stray bits on the inside. Perfect. Okay, let's clean this up. I'm not going to put the embossing powder away because I am going to need it again in a little bit. Okay, now it's time to heat this. Okay, perfect. That is all heated. So now I'm going to take another distressing. This one is Villainish Potion. I am going to smush it on my craft mat. And I'm going to spray it with some water. We want to get that nice and flowy ink. I'm going to take a clean brush, going to dip it in there, and we're going to wash this over top of our embossed stamped image. Just wash that all over there. Might add in a little bit more here, more there. Okay, so you can see where my embossing is. Is this stamp still available? It is actually, Arlene. I did check yesterday and we still have it in stock. And it is, just give me a second. Let me grab the code for you. It's a France Papillon FP006 is what that one is. And it's a great one. You know me, I can't resist a good circle. So yeah, these are great. I love them. Okay, so there we go. Now I want to, just to get a little bit of interest in that one, I'm just gonna, it's fairly wet. You can see that, lots of water in there. So I'm going to, instead of taking my heat tool with it, I'm actually gonna set that aside and let it kind of dry on its own. Now, again, I can't waste ink, right? You can't waste it. So I'm just gonna pick up a little bit of this ink and let's just, this is my one from before where I put the paint on. I'm just gonna do a little bit of tapping because why not? And while we're at it, let's bring this in. This is our tag that I did earlier. This is what we're gonna be doing. Let's just take some of that ink and let's splatter some of that on there too. Perfect. Okay, so let's set that aside to air dry. And we're letting this air dry as well. And I added some splotches to that art journal page. Okay, gonna set that aside. I'm all done with this paintbrush, so it's gonna go into the clean water as well. Let me just tidy up a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, let me give this a quick dry. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, let me grab my stamp platform again. Remember I said I wasn't done with that stamp yet. So what I need to do, okay, I'm going to put my tag back in my stamp platform. Still going to need my embossing powder, going to need my embossing ink, and I'm going to put my tag in there. Now I need to decide where's my focal point going to be. So if I look back at my original, sort of in the lower half-ish, kind of in the middle, but a little bit lower, it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to put it kind of so it's overlapping this part and it's overlapping that part. So it gives it something to anchor it. Okay, so let me put that in there. Take that tag out just for a moment. Let me pick up that stamp. Okay, I'm going to use my anti-static tool again, or my little anti-static pouch. Tap that in there. And I'm going to take that embossing ink and ink that up. You're probably wondering, why is she doing that on the tag as well as on here? Well, I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so let's stamp that. Let's ink it up again. And stamp it one more time. Fabulous. Let me just wipe that embossing ink off my stamp. I am done with this stamp now, so it can come out of my stamp platform. And go back in there. Okay, stamping platform. I'm done with that. Bring back in my coffee filter and my embossing powder. Going to cover that. Here we go. Give it a bit of a tap. Wonderful. Put that back in there. Okay, and I'm done with my embossing powder and my coffee filter. So that will go off to the side. Just going to check, don't really have much stray, I don't see in there. So now I can melt this embossing powder. Okay, just take a quick peek at that. Make sure everything is melted and shiny, which it is, so that's good. Let's come back to this. So it's drying really well. I like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and just soak up some of that excess. There we go, just some of the excess there. That's great. I'm going to give this a good dry now. Perfect. Okay, that's all dry. So I'm going to take my fussy cut and scissors. Just want to make sure that when you reheat the embossing powder, it can get a little bit sticky. So you just need to make sure you let it cool down before you touch it. And that's good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to cut around right outside that circle. Okay. So you're probably thinking, well, that's a waste of embossing powder. Well, maybe, but I really like this technique. So I'm just going to go really carefully around and just cut on the outside of that circle. Everything on the inside is still going to be there, and then I'm going to be able to layer it over this, and then you will see everything that I cut away. But our center will be this wonderful inky purple circle. So let me just carefully cut around. Hang on. So for those of you who are not familiar with embossing powders, there are quite a few out there, and you'll see some are fine, some are super fine detail, some are chunky, some are glittery. When doing an image like this, it's important to use a super fine detail because the powder is very fine and it will make sure that you have all of this detail left. If you use something chunky, you're really going to lose a lot of that. Hey Mari, how are you? Okay, so I've cut that out so you can see what I've done there. Now you can see I've got that white edge. I'm not a fan of the white edge, so I'm actually going to bring in my black ink again. And I have a brush that's dedicated to this black ink because it's permanent. So I have a brush that's dedicated to that. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and gently get rid of that white edge. Some people don't mind it and they leave it, which is fine. I'm not a fan. So I always ink my cut edges because I don't like that white edge. So I'm just going to gently just go around with my brush and get rid of that white edge. Okay, there we go. I think I got everything. Wonderful. Okay, so this is an ink and it is a permanent ink, but I am going to take my heat tool to it to make sure that that is dry. Okay, yeah, isn't that a great stamp, Mari? I love it. It's this one from France Papillon and Paper Artsy because of course it is. I love Paper Artsy stamps, but I love it. I did use the biggest circle, but what I like about this is, see this one? This fits inside. So I could have stamped this first, and you can stamp this first and then stamp this over top because this fits inside this. Yeah, it's amazing. I just love that. Okay, so now I've got this, right? So if I turn this, I can, oh, here we are. So I'm using this as my guide, this part, very distinctive, and I can see that it matches this. So when I go to put this in, I'm actually going to line it up. So then I get this nice, it looks like the original stamp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab my art glitter glue. And I am going to just apply glue all around there. Now I am going to take my finger because I want to make sure it gets to the edges. Just going to do that. Just need a little bit more glue in the middle. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I line everything up again. Perfect. I'm just going to set my pressure tool on there. It's actually the perfect size. So I'm going to set my pressure tool on there. That's going to hold that down there while that glue just dries and make sure it sticks. So I'm just going to let that sit there for a moment. Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to work on my sentiment and whatever image you want to put on here. Maybe you don't want to use a person. A flower would look great. An animal, birds would look great on here. I really love these. Now, maybe you have some of the paper dolls from Tim Holtz. Those would also work great here. But I am sort of obsessed with these paper artsy stamps. So on earlier, before we started, I actually stamped these. So this image here is, again, another Paper Artsy Mini. There you go. So this is MN09. We just got this in the last shipment. So I'm kind of obsessed. I kind of like it. So I might use this one on my tag. This is the other one I used, and this is the one, remember I showed you this at the beginning, the Urban Snapshots. So again, this is from Paper Artsy, loving the Urban Snapshots. If you knew me in the 1980s, I may have looked sort of like this. Just saying. So maybe that's why I love this stamp. But I also got this one. This one, so you see it has advice to daughters, which I love that stamp. And then you will do foolish things, but do them with enthusiasm. And then they have this one, which is advice to sons. So they both are called passing time. This one is USPT3 and USPT4 is the advice to daughter. So as soon as I saw these, I'm like, I have to get them. If I'm the only one who buys them, that's fine because I need to get them and I love them so much. So I did yesterday when I was working on my original tag. I wasn't sure what I was going to use. So I actually stamped all of them. So there's that guy there. I kind of love his tooth that he's wearing. I have one very similar, so I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So stamped him, cut him out. He didn't make the final cut. And then there's this one, which is the two girls standing together, and then this guy here. There you go. I'm not exactly sure what this is. Is it a sword? Is it an oboe? I don't know what it is. But anyhow, I like them. So I cut them all out. I wasn't sure which one I was going to use. This one sort of was kind of second. That one, maybe that one. But I'll keep them. Never know. Might put them in my art journal. But I am really feeling this one. So I think I'm going to use this one tonight. So what I'm going to do, and sorry to bore you with my cutting, but I'm going to cut that one out. And I've said it before, I am not the best fussy cutter. So I tend to do my cutting very fast and very sloppy. But I know a lot of you love your fussy cutting and are very precise about it and slow and take your time. I am not one of those fussy cutter people. So I'm just going to go around and cut this out. I love this mini stamp. So every time I place a paper artsy order, which is generally about once a month, I am going to be bringing in more of their mini stamps and mini stencils because they are not only are a great price point, but they're just really great images. And these are not done by any of their signature or eclectica designers. These are done by Mark and Leandra are the owners of Paper Artsy. And a lot of these images, so Dunya also does these, they collect images in old books, in advertisements, dictionaries, and then they make stamps out of them. So I'm a little obsessed with her. Isn't she amazing? I love that. Okay, so let me just grab my tag here. Let's just see how that's doing. Oh, that's stuck down really good. That's nice. So that's what that looks like. So you can see I stamped it, embossed it, colored it in, and then I fussy cut out all this around the outside. That's why I stamped it and embossed it on my tag because I wanted to layer them together so I didn't lose any of this. But you can see how that focal point came together. Isn't that lovely? I love how this looks in here. That's gorgeous. Okay, so now I've got my little image. She's going to go maybe over here. And then I also have my sentiment. I'm going to use the same sentiment because it's kind of fun. You will do foolish things, but do them with enthusiasm. And I think as crafters, I think that's kind of what we need to do. We need to craft with enthusiasm. Okay. Hey, Tony, how are you? Okay, so I'm just going to go in. Now, if you wanted to make sure that these were cut really straight and neat, you can use your trimmer. I'm just going to use my scissors and I am going to cut these apart. So you can see what I did over here on the first one. I cut them apart and layered them over that background. So again, that circle just gives them a nice anchor to sit on so it doesn't look like they're floating out there. So let me put that there. Trim this up. I am going to ink the edges of these. Oops. And let's do this. And I think I'm going to cut off the word Colette. Okay, there we go. So those are all trimmed up. Oops, not this one. Now, before I ink the edges and glue them down, what I need to do is I need to make sure, oops, yeah, the with enthusiasm is a little long, so I'm going to cut the two words apart, with and enthusiasm. And there we go. Okay, so that is how it's going to go. There's the original here. There we go. So you can see, even though I'm doing the exact same techniques, my stamping is different. You know, I'm putting the images on different sides, so they're different, right? Right? I mean, yeah, I could try and recreate it, but you can see this is a little bit more darker stamping, but still love it. It's awesome. Now, I do want to ink these edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, if you're wondering what these are, this is the Honeybee reverse tweezers, which I love. I love reverse tweezers. I probably got about 4 pairs of them, kind of all over the place. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to drag it across that ink pad. It doesn't take a whole lot. It does not take a lot to add. Okay. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to take my glue again. I'm going to add a little smidge of glue on the back of that. And you can see I'm leaving these so I know exactly where I want to put them. There you go. Stick that on there. She's going to go here. And I'm not worried about getting them straight. In fact, I don't want them straight. I want them a little kind of higgledy-piggledy on there. Okay, so next I'm going to do the word enthusiasm. So I'm doing the top one. I'm going to do the bottom one. Again, I just want to ink the edges just a smidge. Doesn't take a whole lot. Oops. And again, I don't need a lot of glue because I don't want the glue squishing out when I put this on there. I don't want it all squishing out when I push it down. So I'm using very little glue. So that's going to go, oops, that's going to go there. Just tap that down. Perfect. Grab this one. And one more side. And then glue. There we go. And 2 more. Let's grab this one. Just ink those edges up. You don't have to ink the edges. It's just something that I like to do. So this is certainly optional. It's certainly not something you absolutely have to do, but I like the look of it. A little bit more glue. There we go. And one more, and then I'll just stick her down, and then we'll be done. So you can see how important it would be to have some reverse tweezers, because there would be no way. Oops, I don't know why that's not focusing. Ooh, I don't know why. Like, that's really tiny. So the reverse tweezers are really important because there'd be no way I'd be able to hold those in my fingers. And one last side. Perfect. A little bit of glue. Hi, Lori. Hey, Heather. I'm going to stick that on there. Okay, so now I'm going to take my little person here. Now you can see she's got white edges. Now this one is a little bit, because it's in a shape. Sometimes what I do is I'll take like a Sharpie and go around it. But I'm just going to go in again with my ink, my blender brush and just go in and just kind of tame down those white edges a little bit. You drop everything with reverse tweezers? Oh, see, I don't like regular tweezers because I feel like my hand's going to cramp up just by holding it. So I love the reverse tweezers. They're my favorite. Okay, let me cover this up. Move that over here. So there's my little image of her. Going to take some glue. Just going to spread that around just a little bit. Just make sure it gets to the edges. And I'm going to set her down. She's going to go right in that bottom corner. That will give her a nice anchor point so it doesn't look like she's floating. There we go. Look at that. That's cool. Now you can see here, I did ink the edge of my tag. Maybe I sound like a broken record, but I love inking the edges of my tag. And usually is I'll just take my ink pad and just run it just along that edge. I could take the brush, the blender brush, and do this exact same thing, but I'm going to use my pad and just do that. There we go. Doo, 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 doo. There is my finished tag. There you go. Isn't it? I love it. I absolutely love it. So here's the original one that I did yesterday and the picture that I showed. The exact same. I used the exact same sentiment. Different image, very different image. This one's from the Urban Snapshots. This one is from their Hot Pick. So I love both of them. But you can see how easy it is to create a focal point on a tag. Now, these techniques that I showed you, you could very easily transfer this over to a art journal page. This would also work really good for a card. I've done this techniques on cards, so if you are doing that, you can certainly use them on a card. Now, this one here, you can see what I did. So remember when I said if you're doing techniques, if the techniques on tag series, you can write on the back everything that you use. I did write the date and that it was done on a Monday Night Live, and it is actually going to go on my binder ring so that I can refer back to it and know exactly what I did. There we go. Very, very cool. So there's my binder ring started with all our technique tags. So there we go. This one will go to the store. I'll put a QR code on the back of it. So anyone who's visiting the store, if you take a look at this and you're like, oh, how does she do that? You'll be able to flip it over and you'll be able to scan the QR code and it'll take you right to this video on YouTube. So what I'm going to do now, let me just go back to my overhead camera or my front camera. Let me just move that out of the way. Let's come back here. Hello, everyone. It's me again. So I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this technique on tags Monday Night Live. I hope you learned something. If you did want to find this video again, you will be able to find it on our Facebook page. But we use our social media quite a bit. So it will kind of get lost in the feed. If you do want to find it more easily, it will be more easily found on our YouTube channel. There is a playlist on our YouTube channel called Monday Night Live. As soon as we're done, I'll make sure that it gets categorized over on to that playlist on YouTube. And you'll be able to go back and not only watch this one, but all of the rest of our Monday Night Lives whenever you would like to. So thank you so much for joining me. It's really great hanging out with you. And I will be back next Monday with another Monday Night Live and more techniques on tags. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.